Once you've written out 5, if you can make that far, if you can flip it over to the non-line side. The needs were the basic needs, and now what you would want to make in the downtown, the next level. So needs are basic things. Wants are, we want this to occur in our downtown development area. And then Christian will hand out 2 more 3x5 cards to each of you. Should have given one to the people in attendance. What's that? I know he's counting on you to grind it out, though. All right, on the next card on the line item, if you can put on the top of that one, wishes. These might be, just as I stated, man, it'd be really cool to have in our downtown area. It might be something that we have to develop in a capital improvement plan to finance. Our goal is always to not finance anything, pay for it in cash. But these are wishes for the downtown area. And if you can write wishes on top of that for me. When you're done with the wishes downtown, if the other card that's completely blank, if you move to a thought process of village-wide, what I'm looking for is your input on areas of importance for this village. Could be parks and rec, could be police services, could be youth activities. This is village-wide. And this one's first is the needs, the basic needs. We should definitely be providing these areas. On the other side, we'll do the wants. And then ultimately, we'll move back to that one that you titled wishes and just go on the non-line version for village-wide wishes. After we complete that, then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. DeBalt and Ms. DeLong to discuss their committee meetings and ideas they had. for those that might be done, I would like you to make note, you'll be getting correspondence reference this, but to reserve May 18th from noon to 1:30 on your calendar, and we'll be corresponding in the future on that date and time. And Christian will head up and grab those, so if you want to just kind of hold them up, he'll grab them from you as you're completed with all that. All right. All right, I appreciate that. We'll compile this into a summary and report back next month, as well as be in a position for what the business's input was, neighborhood's input in that. But if you're okay with John and Tanya to give a report from their committee, staff's been working with them. I do want to remind the board, the discussion is on needs, wants, and wishes, and we'll listen as staff to this discussion, then we formulate all that, we'll do the research on cost and investment, and then at our May meeting, we will present our recommendations as it relates to the DDA. We'll look for feedback from you. If there's readjustments that need to take place, we'll present those in June for ultimate board approval for the 22-23 fiscal year as it relates to the DDA section of the budget. So.
Go ahead, Tanya. You got the notes.
Okay. Hi. We met the DDA. There's John and Bill and myself and Don, and we met with Jim. Thank you. Several times to discuss our needs, wants, and wishes for the village. And I had sent or posted on Facebook and around the village about what people felt like we needed in the village, and I got over 370 responses, only one negative response in the entire thing, and was totally overwhelmed with the response. I think we all were. So we took that, we took things that we had been talking about, and we kind of came up with our ideal needs, wants, and wishes list that we wanted to recommend to the staff. And we took in just the DDA area. Obviously, there are other things that we've talked about that are village-wide, like what we just did on our cards. But our needs, one of the main things that kept coming up was things for middle school and high school students to do after school. There's nowhere for them to go. There's not anything for them to do. And they end up just wandering around the village. And you know what that can eventually lead to if they don't have anything to do. So we thought the basketball courts, Bill suggested the basketball courts that are at the high school that are beside the tennis court, right?
Yeah, that was more of suggestions that we talked to schools.
Schools about that. Right. And then there's another one at Sunset that we thought maybe the staff could talk to the school about repairing or replacing the goals on those basketball courts and maybe repairing the asphalt on those courts. And that would give a basketball option that really would be out of school money rather than ours, because that's not inside our purview. And then we talked about a tetherball court possibly in Clark Park. All kids like to play tetherball. I don't know many that don't. And then the other thing we talked about was possibly a volleyball court in Clark Park or somewhere else that the kids would be able to access that. We talked about an arcade and a snack shop, and this could be done at maybe Apple Knockers if we could talk to them about adding some pinball machines to what they have. Hopefully, you know, that would give kids something to do, and they would go there after school, spend their money on snacks, ice cream, because right now they go to Speedway after school, and the ice cream shop's right there. So that would be a benefit for the kids as well as a benefit for for Apple Knockers. Then we talked about business wayfinding signage for the downtown shops and businesses on corners. And I saw a sign online when we were talking, and it just has historic, and it says town, and it says food this way, shopping this way, parking this way. And we're talking about people that go to Vickers and they never go further into town, and they didn't realize that we had the things that were downtown. So one of the places that we thought would be a good place to put a wayfinding sign would be there at Vickers, pointing to downtown, you know, pointing to there's more food down here, there's shopping down here, there's parking down here. The sign at Oswald Park will really help, I think, because that'll be big enough that people can see that when they're at Vickers or at the grocery store. And there are a lot of different signs we could purchase that would go along really well with the style and design of the furniture and the ashtrays and things that we have downtown already. On our wants, we talked about a skate rink in the park that would be temporary, that could be put up in the winter and have an ice skating rink. And Don said we should all, yeah, the pavilion would be a good spot. And we talked about the pavilion a little bit, doing that. Indian Lake Nazarene Camp has a temporary ice rink that they put up every year, and it's just plastic, and it kind of snaps together. It has a liner. It snows, it rains, it freezes. There's no refrigeration. The only thing it costs is buying the temporary rink and the liner that goes in it. And I have a picture, but you can't see it. But we could do lights and stuff, and that would be a really fun thing for kids to do after school. Families could do in the evenings, on the weekends. And then Senior Citizen Center for activities, if we could work with South County, maybe doing some senior activities. There are not very many things for our seniors to do here. And so we talked about that. Another thing we talked about were the plaques, the historic plaques that the Historical Society is putting on the buildings downtown. We have some done already, but they're doing one a year, and we thought that maybe we could use part of our funds to fund 2 of those per year to add to the number of plaques, because all the visitors that come into town stop and read those plaques. I know when we were standing at McKenzie's, I stood there and I read the ones for 103 and 101. It's a very good way to bring our past to our future, I think. And another thing that I had thought about that, I'm sorry, I hadn't said, or maybe we had at our meeting, and maybe you could help. We could go to the Historic Society, to the depot, and look for pictures of the old buildings downtown. Have really nice copies made of them. Maybe type up or print a paragraph about what the building was, who the people were that built it. Get them framed and give them to the store owners or the business owners to hang up in their building, so that when patrons are in and out, they could see that old building when it was built in 1874 and what it looked like and what it was used for. I know my building that I had beside Rise and Dine was a blacksmith shop. And the ramp that went down to my sewing room and classroom in the back was actually the ramp that they ran the carriages up into to work on the wheels. And it was an alleyway through there, and I didn't know that at the time. But I mean, there's tons and tons of interesting things that we could find, I'm sure, and make our village more aware of our buildings and what they are. Another thing that came up was a pack and ship location. It doesn't have to be a pack and ship franchise, but just somewhere that would offer the service of selling boxes, selling, the styrofoam peanuts or some other kind of filling, to put something in, print a label, let us pay for a FedEx or UPS label so that it could be picked up from there every day. The closest one is the Target Shopping Center. And then our wishes were to extend the trailhead from the park out there into the village, so that people could ride their bikes or know where to ride their bikes from the parking lot to downtown. Then, of course, a splash pad. We would like to do that. All of us that have children and grandchildren think that's the most, and you're really going to want one of those, Jim. So we're talking about 2024, 2025 for a splash pad. And they're a lot of fun if you don't know what they are. They're things that, they're metal. They shoot water out. They have buckets that fill up and then dump over you when you stand under it. And sprinklers and water shoots up out of the ground. And kids really have a blast playing with those. Selfie photo murals is another thing that several people mentioned that they would love to have. And I started looking, and I showed the guys pictures when we were in our meeting. A lot of towns have selfie murals around. They're butterfly wings or angel wings, or I saw a really cute one that was a tree with a swing, and you could actually pretend like you were sitting on the swing. But it's where people that live here or come to visit here could take a selfie and say, I'm in Vicksburg, Michigan. The bridge area on Prairie Street. Bill, can you talk to this?
Yeah, I just mentioned that bridge over there really needs to be updated, I think. You can see on one side where it's washed out and the concrete's starting to collapse. Do something different with the fencing and maybe possibly put sidewalks on both sides so that you can access through there easier. So that's a long-term project, though, that would be down the road.
Right, we didn't, thank you. We didn't put a timing in for that, but we thought that when we're looking at long-range projects, that that would be a good capital expenditure project to work on. And Alec, we want to have more food truck rallies. Everybody wants more food truck rallies. They had a ball at that one and they want to see more. So that's pretty much, what we came up with.
Tanya, can I just add pickleball courts to your?
There's gonna be a pickleball court.
Oh, really?
Yes, the Parks and Rec Committee, right, is doing a pickleball court over by the Little League fields.
We always have to remember that the budget is voted on and supported by the village council. So it's not Parks and Rec, but there was a pickleball court put in the 21-22 fiscal year. And we actually received some grant dollars, considerable grant dollars, about $17,500. However, when we went out to bid, it came in over our estimated budget by $28,000. So we're carry forwarding that money. But pickleball, to my surprise, was fairly universal last year, and so far in all of the Zoom contacts it came up unsolicited, and then this year in 2 out of the 3. But when I brought it up in the 3rd, they made it that it was a priority of theirs as well. So we will be positioning that into the budget.
And it's also something they do on a regular basis at the Methodist Church in the gymnasium. So there's already, groups of people that are doing it inside.
Very nice.
The other thing I heard you say was the hockey rink, and we went to Sutton's Bay, and they have a hockey rink for the public, and they have like a 55-gallon drum with like hockey sticks and pucks. They even have like big motorized equipment to clear off the ice that it's just for anybody to use, which was, yes. It was amazing, but it was really a lot of fun, and it really was a great place to be outside. They had like a fire pit area too, that if you brought your own wood, you could have a fire. It was really a great experience, so I love the idea. And I know Otsego did one through their Main Street program, and they do a lot of winter festivals and activations around that too, and that's a big draw for them as well.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, they put kind of like a roof over it, sort of, so it's covered. So we may want to talk to them about it too.
Is the pavilion within the DDA's boundaries, though?
No, sir.
Okay, it's not. So a lot of these things we're talking about, or we've brought to this board, are future things that are going to be in advance or coming up. Like, we know that we're putting money away for, or going to eventually do the big parking lot behind the hardware store. Clark Park is a big project that the DDA is within the DDA boundaries, and there's a lot of space over there that the kids that can be done for community services in that thing. So a lot of these functions that Tanya mentioned, with like a basketball court or a small volleyball court or whatever, the DDA would like to be involved with the incorporation of those projects, of that project. Tanya has mentioned in the past also that when the big parking lot is done, we try to provide a movie night type theme parking lot, so it can be doubled as that. There's all kinds of different things, Friday nights, Saturday night movies down there, things like that. We've talked about that before. So these are things that are gonna come up in the next 4 years, but
Yeah, I think part of it's been our practice as a staff when we take in these needs, wants, and wishes, and really just listening to the ideas that are all good, and whether they fall in a boundary or outside of a boundary. But what we do is we listen to them, and then when we start behind the scenes, I mean, with the Historic Society on the Historic Village coming up. I have Parks and Rec. Obviously, the council ultimately will make the decision, but as staff presents it, I think part of what we try to do is create a realistic time frame. The bridge on Prairie Street we've looked at, we recognize it's $200,000 because of the requirements. It's not a simple fix, and it's been looked at. So I absolutely agree with it. There'll be a lot of silos of money used on something like that. We're looking to see the ARPA money for infrastructure, if that's a possibility or not. More of a priority, we're working with the drain commissioner, reference the dam. But specific to the ideas stated, which are all great, we'll incorporate them and then come back with what would be a realistic timetable given the availability money as we're projecting it out 5 years to be able to accomplish as much. It's our goal to accomplish all the needs, all the wants, and then prioritize the wishes to the council in a form of a capital improvement plan village-wide. And to be able to project when the village will have cash on significant investments of the future. The parking lot alone, $750,000. So, you know, those are all great ideas, and I love the conversation. I truly do.
I forgot there was one more thing that we had on our needs, and
I heard you mention that splash pad.
well, it wasn't just the splash pad.
Oh, all right.
The dog bowls
The dog.
to go beside the
We always have.
pet stations.
That's a need for that too.
It's also, in being straightforwardly honest, a liability to the village. And it's a nice thing. Can we do it? We'll see, but we're not going to put the village in a position to assume liability. That's part of our responsibility as well. So it is being analyzed, but, you know, I've said in council meetings, they pay me to say no, because anyone can say yes, but it takes explanation on the whys. Don't have that answer, and we've talked about it and love to accomplish everything, but I have to be concerned about that as well. So that's why we never use the vernacular extra money, Mr. DeBalt. A lot of things that I think you'll see able to be accomplished. The last item, though, because I know there was discussion, was on the grant opportunities and looking at a revamped type grant opportunity in 22-23 fiscal year. But I think it's important for this board to have a conversation. It's staff's recommendation that if we identify businesses that are making an investment, they have contractors lined up to begin that work, that those opportunities could be submitted retroactively for the grant dollars that are going to come up in July. So I'd like, if the board can have that conversation and possibly, you know, especially so we can communicate to some businesses that we aren't saying yes or no on they will get a grant, but they'll be able to submit a grant if they've had this construction in the last 12 months due to the fact we paused that opportunity for the fire suppression. So.
We did talk about the facade grant program as well as the DDA loan program in our meetings. And this is what we thought we would present to the whole board to see what y'all thought about it. I'm going to use the example of $30,000, $12,000 from Vicksburg Foundation, and a matching $8,000 or $18,000 from the village, which they match us. So that would give us, say we had $30,000 to use for grants, and what we thought would be nice instead of I believe it was $2,500 that we were doing before, if we would do 3 small grants of $5,000 each, and then do 1 large grant of $15,000, that would give, with the cost of materials and everything as crazy as it is, that would give them more to work with. And we would be able, and if it's less, then we would split it out in percentage-wise amounts, maybe not 3 5s and a 15, but maybe 3 4s and a 12 or something, depending on what our total was. You got a question?
Yeah, is it currently now the amount is limited to a certain amount
Yeah.
per application?
Yeah. Right now, it's $2,500.
Right now, it's up to $2,500.
Right.
It covers up to 80%, up to $2,500. If that makes sense to you, okay? It covers 80% of your
So if it costs
project
$1,000,
up
then
to
it's
up to $2,500.
All right.
So if it costs you $1,800, it covers 80% of that $1,800. If it costs you $3,500, the maximum amount is $2,500 that you can
Right.
get.
Right.
On,
Percent of 2,500, whichever's greater.
on the dollar levels, staff isn't concerned with that. We would set the criteria that establish the parameters of the grant and present that to the board so we know it meets the governmental expectations on legislations and the legality of it. So if the board looked at what I would say an expanded grant opportunity, I'd drop the word facade, but an expanded grant opportunity of using what Tanya presented, initially 3 grants up to 5,000, 1 larger grant up to 15,000. When we present the recommendation to the board, it will have the criteria for the $15,000 grant as well as then the 3 $5,000 grants. And we'd make sure that was legally reviewed so it met the DDA legislative requirements.
Okay, and there are two other aspects that we wanted to look at too. One is being retroactive for the 2022 fiscal year, since the program was halted for the fire suppression. We have the money that we could, and we only have one business that actually applied for the grant during that period, and that we feel like that should be retroactive for that one, since it was applied for before the grant program was actually suspended. And then the other thing we talked about that we'd like to do, but it's up to you guys, and then finally up to the council. We'd like to include building interiors as well, but we have specific things that we want to allow.
I think, Tanya, that's what Jim just mentioned.
Right.
If you go through what he just mentioned, I don't mean to interrupt you,
No,
but
you're
he
right.
just mentioned that it would be done
Not
through
just
the
facades.
legislative part of the government, making sure that we
Right.
don't have, if you want to rephrase what you said, Jim, it's exactly what she
No,
just
we
said.
would just set the parameters of the grant and have it reviewed by the village attorney. And that those eligibility would be listed out within the grant.
Do you want to know what we suggested?
No. If the board wants to know,
Do you want to know
we're
what we
gonna,
suggested?
Sure.
We suggested historical restoration and not rehabilitation or remodeling, fire suppression systems, fire alarm systems, electrical systems updates, things that would make the buildings safer for the public. and historical restoration.
Was there any conversation around like the usage? You know, I would imagine that not every business would be able to use kind of a historical restoration for their modern day business. Was there any conversation around that?
We didn't have any conversation about that. It was more about all of our 90% of our buildings in Vicksburg are historic buildings, right? Okay, so would we fund something to be more modern, which the village is going that way, or would we fund something that would bring it back to the historic areas? You know, when you take the ceiling tiles off the buildings and stuff, there's metal roofing on top. I'm sure that every building in here, every building down there has tin ceilings or something on there that could be restored back to the original ceilings. That's just something that we wanted to present to this board to bring that historical look back when you walk into something, or would we rather furnish something modern or update to a more modern look where you tear everything down and everything goes drywall again, and you know, ceilings and things like that. So
I think from what I heard, that might be, if the board wanted it, part of the scoring matrix that is created by staff and legal that presents back to you, that there might be X amount of points if it's bringing a historical restoration versus what John described, but it would be, you know, points based, and that's what we're gonna, our challenge will be to come up with a fair and impartial system that ultimately ends up awarding. I mean, some of the impacts that we already know we're looking at is prior grant awards for buildings, the amount of money into each of those buildings versus potentially new recipients of grant money.
The other thing is working to get historic designation for our downtown.
That's already well in the works for
Right.
village-wide, and that has to do with individual tax credits, nothing to do with the village.
Okay,
But
all
it's
right.
already in the works, it's at the state, and it's been approved by the state. so.
Okay,
and I guess to give you guys more of a perspective on it, what they did to 101 and 103 Prairie Street is a historical restoration. If you walked in there, it's back to the historical restoration of that building, so.
Thanks. So,
Mr. Newman, I thought raised this, I don't know if you had comments or? Okay.
so Jim, if I hear correctly, you're going to kind of take these thoughts and you're going to kind of develop a little bit of a framework for this body to react to. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. You know, it's been our goal over the last 6 years to take away the technical side. And when we present it, we've heard pretty much of the framing or foundation of what's said is we'll present alternatives in the amounts listed here tonight, but we'll also have traditional and different options, but also look at having a detailed scoring plan that we can roll this program out on July 1st. And we'll have our recommendation as it relates to retroactivity and how far the look-back process in our estimation should be in that as well.
John, I have a question for you. In the past with the grant, the facade grant, I remember the adoption rate being a little bit low. The usage rate.
When we first brought it out, it was used a lot. Okay? Well, all the buildings were getting repaired, so there were less and less things to being done. Okay? And then COVID hit, and nobody had the money to do anything.
Okay.
And that's 3 years ago, okay? COVID hit, right? So nobody had money to do anything because everything there, so that's when it got shut down. But the first year, it was completely sold out. Everybody got on it. Second year, again, up to like 90% of it. We only had one grant, $2,500. I don't even think it was that. I think it was like $800 left over the second year. Then the third year, there was maybe $4,000 left over. So you could see that people were utilizing it, okay? A lot of those businesses utilized it and are not here anymore, okay? So this board does need to look at that too. Is the business gonna, I guess not to look at that, no, let me take that back. A new business could come in and then change that over, and that's the whole point that we started this grant, was to bring new businesses to town. Because if you got to have 80% of your sign, which a sign cost you $2,000, if the village or the grant provided 80% of your sign, that's a lot of money to a small business coming into town to open up a business when you only got to pay 20% of your sign. And that was the incentive that we started this program, was to bring businesses to Vicksburg, because the village of Vicksburg appreciates their businesses when they're here.
I think one way to look at it is the transformation of Prairie Street. When buildings started to invest in just the painting of the outside building. And one building is done, that whole entire block on the north side between Main Street and Kalamazoo have all been re-updated. And it's kind of like the broken window theory and positioning paper and police work. It just catches on. And the year that there was money left over, the only reason there was money left over, the money was awarded in grants, but the business they were awarded to after the fact elected not to do the work. Therefore, because they front the money, do the work's completed, and it's a reimbursement. So the businesses chose not to invest, therefore we carry forward the money on that.
On that program with the painting and stuff down there, some of them use the paint program, some of them use the grant program for it. There was two options there, and that was another thing to do. That if you purchased the paint from the paint store, you had up to $200 of paint that could be bought and purchased to put on your building. Or if you had a professional painter paint your building, the grant would cover that, because it's done by a service there. We made a point, if you did the paint yourself and stuff, there was a guidelines that we're not going to pay you as a business owner to paint your own building. It had to be done by a professional service. But you could purchase the paint from the hardware store, paint it yourself, and then reimbursed by the DDA for the paint. And as Jim said, there was quite a few buildings down on the north side, or the north side of Prairie Street, that did the whole thing.
Yeah,
and Main Street as well.
Other common items have been awnings, windows, that type of work.
I like the idea of making the sums larger. I'll be curious to see the framework, and I think it's a good creative solution. Do you feel like that's a need? Are you opening up the parameters, the amounts? I'm looking at you because you're a downtown business.
Yeah, I would say so, because the cost of everything from 4 years ago to now, even replacing your windows, when we replaced our windows in our building, it was $10,000. It would probably be close to $20,000 to replace those windows in our building today. So by upping the grant is going to help some of these, because if you go down, you still drive down in the wintertime and you still see a few buildings that are frosted over and stuff like that. This gives the incentive for those business owners to redo their buildings. It makes their heat bills less. It makes their air conditioning bills less in the summertime, So, plus it makes the business look, or the village look good when it comes into town.
Through our contact, both through the surveys the last couple of years and personal contact with business owners, it is the number one thing when we start talking about grant opportunities is an increase in the amount.
Thanks.
That could be roofs, you know, a lot of roofs downtown need repairing. Brickwork is expensive as heck. I mean, look at some of the brickwork that's got to be through, you know, that, what do they call it, tuck and pin or tuck and point, is it? All that stuff that has to be done to the building.
Our plan is, Mr. Schenkel, to present multiple options and focused on what we've heard here. But again, overall, we'll know what we're estimating the numbers to be and what your group and all these other constituents are advocating for, and put that in the framework to you. Again, we'll present it in the month of May, and you'll have input at not only that meeting, but between May and June, because ultimately we wouldn't ask for whatever is presented to be approved by yourselves until the June meeting. So,
Thank you. If there's no other comments or questions on facade grants, we can move on to member comments. Any member comments? I want to say thank you to the DDA group, member DeBalt, member Cox.
Bill, did you raise your hand when he looked? Oh, I just saw a finger go up. All right.
Member DeLong and member Wartella. We're trying to get you to speak. Thank you for distilling all of that information into a list that is very comprehensive. Tanya, thank you for posting to Facebook, a very creative solution to getting community input. It's a great tool, so thank you for all the work that you guys did on that. Really appreciate it. All right, time is now 8:30 exactly, and we will adjourn this meeting. Thanks, everyone.